Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The great hall of the Blood Spear clan echoed with forced silence. Alara stood alone in the center of the circular chamber, her wrists bound in ceremonial chains that clinked softly with each measured breath she took. The blue markings on her skin, symbols of her rank and achievements, pulsed faintly in the dim light cast by the crystalline torches along the walls. Surrounding her in a perfect circle were the 13 clan elders, seated on thrones carved from the bones of great beasts. At their center sat Chieftain Corvus, his massive frame draped in ornate armor, adorned with trophies from 100 hunts. His face remained impassive, but something glinted in his eyes, something that went beyond mere disappointment or anger. Before calling for judgment, Corvus rose from his throne and circled Alara slowly, like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. He stopped behind her, leaning close to her ear. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" he whispered, his voice too low for the others to hear. "The hesitation in your strike? The mercy in your eyes?" His fingers traced the clan markings on her shoulder with mock tenderness. Weakness has no place among the Blood Spear. He stepped back to his throne, his public persona returning instantly. "Bring in the witnesses," he commanded, his voice thundering through the chamber. 2 young hunters were dragged in, their bodies bruised and bloodied. Alara recognized them immediately. They had been part of her hunting party. Her heart sank. They had been her friends once. "Tell the council what you saw," Corvus ordered. The first hunter, barely old enough to have earned his first marking, spoke with a trembling voice. She had him cornered. The human was wounded, defenseless, but he faltered, avoiding Alara's gaze. "Continue," Corvus prompted, his voice dangerously soft. "She lowered her spear. She spoke with him." The young hunter's voice broke. "When we moved to finish the kill, she turned on us." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Alara's jaw tightened, but she remained silent. "Is this true?" an elder asked, leaning forward. "I did what was necessary," Alara replied evenly. "The human was not what we were told. Silence," Corvus roared, suddenly on his feet. "You were not sent to question. You were sent to kill." He approached her again, this time for all to see, circling her like she was prey. "2 of our brothers lie dead because of your hesitation. By your hand, not mine," Alara responded, her eyes flashing defiance. "I wounded them only. They were alive when I left." A murmur rippled through the assembled elders. Corvus's expression darkened momentarily before he regained control. "Take them away," he ordered, gesturing to the young hunters. As guards dragged them out, he gave a subtle nod to one of his personal guards. Alara caught the gesture and understood its meaning immediately. The witnesses would not live to see the next sunrise. Her evidence would die with them. "Alara of the Blood Spear," Corvus intoned, his voice filling the chamber like thunder. "Last daughter of the hunter's line, you were sent to eliminate the human infiltrator, a threat to our sacred lands." He paused, letting his gaze bore into her. "You failed." Alara did not lower her eyes. "I tracked him across 3 valleys and 2 mountain ranges. I cornered him, but he lives," Corvus cut her off, "while 2 of our brothers lie dead." An elder named Tarek leaned forward slightly. "Perhaps a lesser punishment?" "The code is absolute," Corvus snapped, silencing him with a look. With deliberate slowness, he removed a ceremonial dagger from his belt, a blade used only for blood oaths and executions. He approached Alara and pressed the tip beneath her chin, forcing her to look up at him. "For this failure, which has brought shame upon the spears of our ancestors," Corvus continued, a cruel smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "you will be given to the desert. May the great worm cleanse our clan of your disgrace." As the guards moved to take her away, Alara caught a glimpse of something in Corvus's expression. Not satisfaction at justice being served, but relief, as if a problem had been solved. It was this look, more than the sentence itself, that sent a chill through her soul. The desert was a sea of incandescent red sand, simmering under 2 merciless suns. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the horizon into a wavering mirage that seemed to breathe with malevolent life. In this unforgiving landscape, nothing survived for long. Nothing except the most resilient, the most brutal, or the most desperate. Ilara was all three. The last huntress of the Bloodspear clan hung suspended against a rock face, her wrists and ankles secured by ancient ceremonial chains that bit into her flesh with each subtle movement. Her blue skin, usually radiant with health and vitality, was now caked in dust and dried blood. The markings of her clan, swirling patterns that denoted her skill and lineage, barely visible beneath the grime. A crowd had gathered at a safe distance, clan members who had come to witness her disgrace, her ritual death. Among them she spotted Corvus, watching with an intensity that seemed excessive even for an execution. Ilara felt no fear, only self-loathing. Her mind replayed the hunt over and over, analyzing where she had gone wrong, where she had hesitated, where she had failed. A lifetime of training, a lifetime of perfect kills, all undone by a single moment of, what? Mercy? Doubt? She couldn't even name it, and that made it worse. The horizon trembled more violently than before. Not from the heat this time. From beneath the sand, half a kilometer away, a colossal shadow began to rise. The dunes swelled like ocean waves before a storm. The worm was coming. It sensed her. It hungered. And in that moment, out of the dusty haze, as if a ghost born of the mirage itself, he appeared. Marcus, a human, her target, the only one who had ever gotten away. He staggered forward, barely keeping his feet beneath him. His tactical gear, once state-of-the-art survival equipment, was shredded, revealing a body mapped with scars, both old and fresh. His skin was burned raw by the twin suns, his lips cracked and bleeding, but his gray eyes, sunken in their sockets, held the unmistakable steel of a veteran who had fought through 100 nameless hells on the galaxy's edge. The crowd parted in shock, some reaching for weapons, but they were too late. Marcus raised his nearly depleted pulse pistol, aiming not at the onlookers but at the lock of Ilara's chains. "Stop him!" Corvus roared, but his warriors hesitated, not out of fear, but confusion. What human would risk death to save the very huntress sent to kill him? Marcus fired not at her chains but at a small cage carved into the rock beside her, where her ritual spear was kept, a ceremonial addition to her execution, to remind her of the weapon she had failed to use properly. The cage door flew open, and the spear fell to the sand at her feet with a dull thud. "I'm not saving you," Marcus said, his voice hoarse with thirst. "I'm giving you a weapon. Show me how a huntress dies." The worm was now meters away. The ground shook with its approach, sand cascading from its massive segmented body as it rose from the depths. Its circular maw, ringed with thousands of serrated teeth that rotated in opposite directions, opened wide enough to swallow her whole. But now Ilara had her spear in her hands and in her soul a turmoil more terrifying than any death. Why had he done this? Was this mercy, respect, or some human game she didn't understand? There was no time to question. The worm lunged. Ilara moved instinctively, muscle memory overriding her exhaustion. She dove to the side, the chain still attached to her wrist trailing behind her, their anchors torn from the weakened rock by the force of her movement. She rolled across the scorching sand and came up in a fighting stance, her spear held at the ready. The battle was ferocious. Ilara moved like a storm, her spear an extension of her will, her body flowing through forms she had practiced since childhood. She was the finest hunter of her generation, and even wounded and humiliated, she was deadly. She dodged the worm's colossal jaws, plunging her spear into the gaps between its armored plates, finding the soft flesh beneath. The monster roared in pain and fury, kicking up tons of sand that blinded her momentarily. But she didn't need to see. She could feel the vibrations through her feet, could smell the creature's blood and rage on the air. From his position, Corvus watched with growing alarm. She was supposed to die quickly, cleanly, a necessary sacrifice. Instead, she was fighting. And worse, the clan was watching her do it with awe. Several of the younger warriors were even cheering her on, their respect for her skill overriding their knowledge of her sentence. Marcus watched from his cover, his soldier's mind analyzing the fight with clinical precision. She was magnificent. Her movements were poetry written in violence, each strike calculated, each evasion perfect. But she was alone, and she was wounded. He could see her movements slowing, see fresh wounds appearing on her body as the worm's armored hide scraped against her. She wasn't winning. She was merely delaying the inevitable. When the worm finally struck with its tail, a lightning-quick motion that seemed impossible for something so massive, Alara was thrown against the rock face with crushing force. The impact knocked the air from her lungs, and her spear flew from her grasp, landing several meters away. She was defenseless. Marcus didn't think about honor. He thought about survival. His eyes darted around, seeking an advantage, a weakness, anything. He noticed a rocky overhang above the worm, already fractured and unstable from years of erosion and temperature extremes. He aimed his pistol, knowing this would be the last charge, and fired at the base of the overhang. With a deafening roar, tons of rock crashed down onto the giant worm, burying its forward section. The creature thrashed wildly, its rear segments coiling and uncoiling in agony as it tried to free itself from the crushing weight. Sand and dust filled the air, obscuring everything for long moments. Corvus stared in disbelief, then fury. With a gesture, he signaled his personal guard. "Kill them both," he ordered, his voice low but clear. "This ends now." As the dust settled, the worm lay still, half buried beneath the rockfall. Alara stared in horror and rage. She had been denied her death, denied her redemption. The bitter taste of dishonor flooded her mouth, worse than blood, worse than bile. "You!" she rasped, struggling to her feet, her eyes burning with fury. "You stole my death, my only chance at redemption." "I saved your life," Marcus cut in, emerging from his cover, his expression impassive. "You can thank me later." "Thank you." She spat blood onto the sand. "You've condemned me to a life of shame. Better to die with honor than live as nothing." At that moment, Corvus's guards advanced, weapons drawn. The clan members backed away, sensing that what was happening had transcended a mere execution. This was now something else, something political, something dangerous. "Now they'll kill us both," she hissed, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Me for surviving in shame. You for desecrating sacred ground." "Then we'd better leave," Marcus noted pragmatically, surveying the terrain with the experienced eye of someone who had made many hasty retreats. For a moment, Alara considered staying, considered facing her clan's judgment, but something had shifted inside her. A question had taken root. Why had this human, her prey, risked his life to give her a chance to fight? There was more happening here than she understood. Without another word, they disappeared into the labyrinth of canyons that stretched beyond the execution grounds. A disgraced huntress and her escaped prey, now bound by a shared fate and pursued by a common enemy. Night fell swiftly in the desert, the temperature plummeting from scorching heat to bone-chilling cold within hours. Alara and Marcus found shelter in a shallow cave, hidden behind a curtain of wind-sculpted rock formations. The adrenaline of escape had sustained them, but now in the quiet darkness, exhaustion and pain rushed in to claim their due. Marcus slumped against the cave wall, his breathing labored. The desert had taken its toll. Dehydration, heat exposure, and the multiple injuries he'd sustained during his own flight from Alara's clan had pushed him to his limits. He fumbled with a small medkit from his tattered gear, trying to clean a deep gash on his arm where a jagged rock had caught him during their escape. Alara watched him from the opposite side of the cave, her eyes reflecting the faint starlight that filtered through the entrance. His movements were clumsy, inefficient. A warrior who had always relied on field medics or automated systems, not his own hands. Blood continued to seep from the wound despite his efforts. A silent battle raged within her. This man was her prey, her failure, the reason for her disgrace. And yet, with a barely audible sigh, she crossed the cave in 3 fluid strides. Without a word, she knelt beside him and took the antiseptic cloth from his hands. "You're making it worse," she said, her voice flat and clinical. "Hold still." He tensed, clearly surprised by her proximity, but did as instructed. She cleaned the wound with precise, economical movements, then reached into a small pouch at her waist, the one thing they hadn't taken from her before the execution, and extracted a small amount of greenish paste. "This will burn," she warned, a moment before applying it to the wound. Marcus hissed in pain but didn't flinch. "Crystalline cactus extract," she explained, wrapping the wound with a strip torn from her own loincloth. "It prevents infection and accelerates healing." "Why?" he asked, his eyes studying her face. "A wounded ally is a liability," she replied without emotion, and we are both being hunted now. So I'm an ally? A hint of amusement colored his voice. You are a temporary necessity, she corrected, moving back to her side of the cave. Nothing more. But something had changed between them. A small bridge had been built across the chasm of their differences. Not friendship, not even trust, but recognition, acknowledgement of a shared predicament. It was a beginning. The next days were a blur of desperate flight and narrow escapes. The blood spear trackers were relentless, following their trail with the persistence of true predators. Alara and Marcus stayed ahead only through a combination of her knowledge of the terrain and his tactical instincts. Their escape became a lesson in survival. Marcus, a veteran of guerrilla warfare on a dozen different worlds, taught her what the ritual halls of her clan never could. He taught her to build traps from scrap, to use the sun and shadows as weapons, to think 3 moves ahead. Honor won't stop a bullet, he told her as they hid from a patrol in a narrow crevice, their bodies pressed uncomfortably close, their breath mingling in the confined space. And dead heroes don't win wars. My people have survived for 10,000 cycles because of our code, she retorted, her voice low but intense. What have your people built that will last so long? We're still here, aren't we? He replied with a grim smile. Adaptability outlasts rigid codes. Their journey led them through the vast emptiness of the desert, each day bringing new challenges and dangers. On the 5th day after their escape, they crested a dune to find an unexpected sight. The wreckage of a human vessel, half buried in the sand, its hull scorched and twisted. Marcus froze, his body suddenly rigid. The emblem still visible on the ship's broken wing was one he knew all too well, a stylized hawk clutching lightning bolts. The insignia of the 117th Tactical Response Unit, his old unit. This shouldn't be here, he whispered, his voice hoarse with shock. As Marcus approached the wreckage, the desert around him seemed to fade away. The heat, the sand, the pain in his body, all receded as memories crashed over him like a tidal wave. 3 years earlier, the briefing room of the UNSC Dauntless, orbiting Tannhauser Station. Captain Marcus Reeves, you're being reassigned, Colonel Harding said, sliding a data tablet across the table. Special reconnaissance mission. Top priority. Marcus frowned, scanning the transfer orders. Sir, with respect, my unit ships out tomorrow for Sector 7. They need me there. Orders came from the top, Reeves. This is non-negotiable. Harding wouldn't meet his eyes. Later that night, Marcus embraced Sergeant Damon Reeves, his younger brother, who would be leading the unit in his absence. It's a milk run, Marcus, Damon assured him with a cocky grin. Routine patrol. We'll see you in 2 weeks. The next morning, Marcus watched from a shuttle window as the transport carrying the 117th, carrying his brother and the 23 men and women he'd trained and fought alongside for 5 years, disappeared into the jump. Point. 1 week later, while deep in hostile territory on his special mission, the news came. Contact lost with the 117th. All hands presumed dead. An equipment malfunction, they said. A navigational error, they claimed. But he never believed it. His brother was the best pilot in the fleet. His team checked their equipment religiously. Something was wrong with the story, but his demands for information hit wall after wall of classified directives and security protocols. When he finally returned to headquarters, he found his personal access codes revoked, his security clearance downgraded. The message was clear: drop it, move on, or else. So he resigned his commission, and he started hunting for the truth. The memory dissolved, leaving him standing before the twisted wreckage that held the answer he'd been searching for all these years. With trembling hands, he brushed away sand from a section of the hull, revealing more of the emblem. With measured steps, he entered the ship through a jagged tear in its side. Alara followed at a distance, observing as he moved through the wreckage with purpose, his eyes scanning the devastation. In what had once been the command center, he stopped before a charred console. There, half melted into the metal, was an identification tag. He pried it loose with gentle fingers, as if handling something infinitely precious and fragile. Sergeant Damon Reeves, he read aloud, his voice cracking slightly. His thumb brushed away the char, revealing a face similar to his own in the embedded photo. Younger, with the same determined eyes. My brother. His fingers closed around the tag. They died here. Not in the Tannhauser sector. Here. His voice had dropped to a whisper. They were never meant to come back at all, were they? Elara watched silently as the human she had been taught to see as nothing more than prey, as an enemy, revealed himself to be as haunted by loss and betrayal as she was. In that moment, she saw beyond the cynical exterior to the wounded warrior beneath. "That's why you fight like you do," she said quietly. "That's why you value survival above honor." He looked up, his gray eyes meeting hers. "Because I've seen what happens when good soldiers die for bad orders." The raw honesty in his voice created a bridge between them, forged in shared understanding of betrayal and loss. "Come," she said softly, not touching him but gesturing toward the exit. "There's nothing more for you here, and we have a long way to go." As they left the wreckage behind, something had irrevocably changed between them. They were no longer simply reluctant allies of convenience. They had seen each other's wounds, recognized each other's pain, and in that recognition, the seeds of something stronger than mere cooperation had begun to take root. After a particularly close encounter with a patrol, they found refuge in a deep cave carved into the base of a cliff. Night had fallen, bringing with it the bone-deep chill of the desert darkness. Marcus managed to build a small fire, careful to keep it far enough inside the cave that its light wouldn't betray their position. In the flickering firelight, he noticed Elara wincing as she tried to clean a wound on her shoulder where a glancing blow had caught her. Without a word, he moved closer, taking the cloth from her hand. "Let me," he said, his voice gruff, but not unkind. She hesitated, then nodded, turning slightly to give him better access to the wound. As he worked, gently cleaning away the sand and dried blood, his fingers brushed against another mark on her skin. A strange, perfectly circular scar near her collarbone, unlike any battle wound he had ever seen. "This scar," he said quietly, his fingers hovering over the mark without touching it. "It's not from combat." Elara stiffened instantly, her entire body going rigid. For a moment, he thought she would pull away, but then something in her seemed to relent. "It's a mark of obedience," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "When I was young, barely into my training, I questioned an order from an elder. I asked why we hunted a certain clan when they had done nothing to threaten us." Her eyes grew distant, and the firelight seemed to flicker with a memory. A young Elara, her blue skin unmarked by the battle tattoos she would later earn, stood before Corvus in the clan's disciplinary chamber. Her small form trembled, but her eyes held defiance. "They had children with them," her young voice protested. "They were refugees, not warriors. Why did we have to kill them all?" Corvus's face twisted with rage. "Weakness," he spat, grabbing her roughly by the arm. "I will burn it out of you." The white-hot brand descended toward her skin as two warriors held her immobile. "The chieftain said my questions were weakness. That doubt was the enemy of action." Her fingers unconsciously traced the scar. "I learned my lesson well." Marcus sat back, regarding her with new eyes. "Where I come from, we call that brainwashing. A strong leader isn't afraid of questions." "Our code is what makes us strong," she replied, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in her voice that hadn't been there before. "Your code chained you to a rock and left you for dead," he said bluntly. Their eyes met across the small fire, and something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, that they were both victims of systems larger than themselves. That night, something fundamental shifted between them, a barrier crumbling away to reveal not an enemy, but a person, complex, wounded, and fighting to survive, just like himself. One night, hiding in the ruins of an ancient outpost, half buried in the sand and forgotten by time, they stumbled upon an abandoned patrol skiff. The vehicle was damaged beyond repair, its engines fused by heat and sand into useless lumps of metal. But its computer core was intact, sealed in its protective casing. Marcus, with the skills of someone who had needed to extract information under dire circumstances many times before, managed to power up the core using salvaged cells from his depleted weapon. In its logbook, he found something that made his blood run cold. "Elara," he called, his voice tight with controlled fury. "You need to see this." On the screen was data on a secret deal. The chieftain of Elara's clan, Corvus, was selling the rights to mine the sacred lands of their people to a human corporation, Nexus Extraction Technologies. In exchange, he was receiving weapons to crush the neighboring clans and become the sole ruler of the region. The log was incomplete, damaged by time and the elements, but it mentioned a contract to eliminate a problem, an elite human operative who knew too much about their operation on this planet, Marcus, and in order to get rid of a witness, the clan's best huntress, Ilara, who might oppose the deal if she discovered it. He betrayed us both, Ilara whispered, staring at the screen, her face illuminated by its pale blue light. Her voice was hollow, her eyes wide with the shock of betrayal. He sent me to hunt you, knowing I would either kill you or be killed myself. Either way, his secret would be safe. And when you failed to kill me but escaped yourself, he had to get rid of you another way, Marcus added, the pieces falling into place. The ritual execution. Convenient. But as Marcus continued to dig through the data, his expression grew darker. He accessed a hidden directory labeled simply Assets. There's more, he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. Much worse. He opened file after file, each more damning than the last. Videos, ledgers, communications with off-world contacts. The files revealed something truly horrific. Corvus wasn't just selling land. He was selling people. Young, promising warriors from his own clan, sent on what they believed were honorable missions to distant worlds. In reality, they were being delivered to the corporation to be transformed into elite mercenary slaves, their minds wiped and reprogrammed, their bodies enhanced with experimental technology. One video showed a young Bloodspear warrior, strapped to a laboratory table, screaming as machines pumped chemicals into his body, and electrodes attached to his brain glowed with sinister energy. Corvus stood in the background, watching impassively as the corporation scientists worked. A new breakthrough, a human voice narrated over the footage. Subject 17 retained 94% of combat training while accepting complete loyalty conditioning. The Bloodspear warriors are proving to be ideal candidates for the program. He's selling your future, Marcus said quietly. Your children. Ilara's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles pale against her blue skin. This is abomination. Beyond dishonor, this is evil, Marcus finished for her. Plain and simple. In that instant, their personal enmity, their arguments over honor and survival, evaporated like morning dew under the twin suns. They had a common enemy and a common goal. I'm going back, Ilara said, her voice hardening with resolve. I'm going to expose him before the clan. Marcus studied her face. They'll kill you on sight. Not if I claim the right of challenge. It's our most sacred law. Any warrior may challenge the chieftain. If I make the challenge in front of the entire clan during a sacred gathering, he can't refuse without losing face. And when would such a gathering take place? Ilara's expression darkened. The Festival of Blades. It begins in 3 days. Then we have 3 days to plan, Marcus said, his mind already working through the logistics, the angles, the risks. We, she questioned, raising an eyebrow. Yes, we, he confirmed with a nod. I have questions for your chieftain too, and those young warriors deserve better than what he has planned for them. They returned not as exiles, but as ghosts of vengeance. Using their combined skills, her knowledge of the fortress's layout and routines, his expertise in infiltration and sabotage, they slipped past the outer perimeter under cover of the festivities. The Festival of Blades was in full swing, the fortress alive with lights and sounds, warriors displaying their skills in ritual combat while others feasted and drank potent fermented cactus wine. Their plan was audacious, not to kill Corvus, but to expose him before the entire clan, to reveal his treachery to those who followed him, to let his own people judge him. They were discovered as they approached the main arena. A young sentry, more alert than his wine-dulled companions, spotted them in the shadows and raised the alarm. The fortress became a battlefield. They fought back-to-back against the best warriors, men Ilara once called her brothers. She was no longer just a huntress. She was a strategist, using Marcus's tactics to sow chaos and confusion. He was no longer just a soldier. He fought with a ferocity and desperation worthy of her people. As they battled their way through a corridor, they found themselves surrounded by 4 elite guards. Marcus was running low on ammunition, and Ilara's spear couldn't hold all of them at bay. We need a diversion, he muttered, scanning the hallway for options. Ilara's eyes fell on the decorative crystal formations embedded in the walls. The same type of crystalline structure as the desert cacti she had shown him, but larger and more ornate. "The crystals," she said urgently. "Break them like I showed you." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He aimed his weapon not at the warriors, but at the crystals on the wall behind them, hitting them at precisely the angle Alara had taught him in the desert. The crystals shattered explosively, releasing not just the stored water, but a blinding flash of light as the mineral compounds within them reacted with the air. The guards, temporarily blinded and disoriented, were no match for Alara's swift attack. "The eastern corridor is clear," she shouted over the din of battle, her spear slick with blood. "We can still reach the arena." "On my mark," Marcus replied, priming a makeshift explosive device cobbled together from mining charges they had found in the outpost. 3, 2, 1, now. The explosion rocked the fortress, not powerful enough to cause structural damage, but perfectly calculated to create a diversion. In the confusion, they slipped through the smoky haze toward the central arena. Corvus sat on a throne made from the bones of a worm, watching the events unfold with a cold smirk that didn't reach his eyes. He was a massive figure, his blue skin darker than Alara's, crossed with ritual scars that proclaimed his victories. His armor was ornate, festooned with trophies taken from fallen enemies. At his side stood a human in corporate attire, a representative from Nexus Extraction Technologies, watching the festival with barely disguised contempt. "The disgrace has returned," Corvus bellowed, rising to his feet as Alara and Marcus burst into the arena. His voice carried over the sudden silence that fell upon the gathered clan. "And she brings human filth with her." Alara stepped forward, raising her spear, its tip catching the light of the ceremonial fires. "I challenge you to a duel of honor, Corvus," she called out, her voice strong and clear. "For your betrayal." The chieftain laughed, a sound like stones grinding together. "Betrayal? You speak of betrayal when you stand beside our enemy? When you failed in your sacred duty?" "I speak of your deal with the mining corporation," she countered, her words causing a ripple of murmurs among the assembled warriors. "I speak of sacred land sold for weapons. I speak of assassination contracts against your own people." Corvus's face darkened, his composure slipping for just an instant before he regained control. The corporate representative began to edge away, sensing that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. "But most of all," Alara continued, her voice rising, "I speak of the young warriors sent off-world, not for missions of honor, but to be sold as slaves, to have their minds wiped and their bodies transformed into weapons for the highest bidder." A shocked silence fell over the arena. Then voices began to rise, confused, angry, demanding answers. "Where is my son?" a warrior cried out. "You said he was on a sacred hunt in the Eastern Territories." "My daughter," another voice joined in. "Gone for a cycle now. You said she was in training with the mountain clans." Corvus's eyes darted around, seeing the crowd turning against him. The corporate man had disappeared completely now, abandoning his partner to face the consequences alone. "I have no honor, child," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I have power." He did not accept the challenge. Instead, he raised his hand in a sharp gesture, and his personal guard, a cadre of the most brutal and loyal killers in the clan, stepped forward from the shadows where they had been waiting. "Destroy them both," he ordered. The guards surrounded them, a dozen warriors armed with spears and blades, moving in perfect coordination born of years of training together. There were too many, even for the two of them. Marcus watched them close the circle, watched them prepare to strike simultaneously, a blow that Alara couldn't possibly parry. In that moment, he did something that defied all tactical logic, something that went against every instinct for survival honed through years of combat. He threw down his weapon, and he stepped in front of Alara, shielding her with his body, just as 3 spears flew toward her. The only sound in the ensuing silence was the sickening thud of the spears piercing his flesh. One through his shoulder, one through his side, and one perilously close to his heart. He collapsed to his knees, his eyes meeting Alara's. There was no regret in his gaze, only a strange peace. The silence was shattered by her scream. It was not a scream of pain or fear. It was a scream of pure, primal rage that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her, as if the spirits of all her ancestors had joined their voices to hers. What happened next became the stuff of clan legend. She was no longer a warrior. She was an incarnation of death itself. She moved through the guardsmen like a scythe through grass, her spear finding gaps in armor, throats, eyes. Her fury knew no bounds, her movements too fast to follow, as if time itself had slowed for everyone but her. For honor, she roared as she fought. But it was no longer the rigid honor of her clan's code. It was something deeper, more primal. The honor of truth, of justice, of protecting those who would protect you. The fight was over as quickly as it began. The last to fall was Corvus, with her spear in his heart, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief as she twisted the blade. "The clan is yours now," he gasped, blood bubbling from his lips. "Rule them better than I did." She didn't respond. She had no words for him. Instead, she dropped to her knees beside Marcus, who lay in a pool of blood that seemed far too large for one human body to contain. His skin was ashen, his breathing shallow and irregular. "Why?" she whispered, cradling his head in her lap, unmindful of the blood soaking into her skin, her clothing. "Why would you do that?" He smiled through the blood, a smile that transformed his rugged face, softening it in a way she hadn't seen before. "Because honor," he rasped each word clearly in effort, "is not about dying in battle. It's about dying for the one who stands beside you." His eyes closed, his breathing becoming more labored. "No," Alara said, her voice firm despite the tears tracking clean lines down her dust-stained face. "You will not die. Not like this. Not for me." She looked up at the warriors who surrounded them, those who had not participated in the fight, who had watched in shock as their chieftain was revealed as a traitor and then defeated. "Bring me the sacred crystals," she commanded, her voice brooking no argument, "and the essence of the night-blooming cactus. Quickly!" There were murmurs of protest. "The ritual is forbidden," an elder said, stepping forward. "The life-binding is dark magic. It has not been performed in 1,000 cycles." "I am chieftain now," Ilara replied, her eyes flashing dangerously. "And I say we will remember who we truly are. Not conquerors, not merchants selling our heritage, but protectors of life. Bring me what I need." The elders brought what she needed, sacred crystals that glowed with an inner light and the distilled essence of the night-blooming cactus that grew only in the most sacred valleys. Ilara placed the crystals in a circle around Marcus's prone form, then mixed her own blood with the essence in a ritual bowl. "Life to life," she whispered, her voice taking on a resonant quality that seemed to echo from somewhere ancient and primal. "Blood to blood, pain to pain, joy to joy. What is mine becomes yours. What is yours becomes mine." As she spoke, the crystals pulsed with increasing intensity, their light flowing like liquid toward Marcus's body, enveloping him in a cocoon of shimmering energy. Ilara drank half of the mixture in the bowl, then carefully poured the remainder between his parted lips. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his body arched as if struck by lightning, and a cry escaped his lips. A cry that was echoed by Ilara as she felt his pain course through her own body. The light from the crystals intensified, becoming almost blinding as it surged between them, creating visible tendrils of energy that connected her heart to his. The assembled warriors watched in awe and fear as the ancient ritual, known to them only through legends, unfolded before their eyes. Some turned away, unable to bear the sight or the implications of what their new chieftain was doing, binding her life force to that of a human, an outsider, forever. As the ritual reached its climax, the crystals began to sing, a high, pure tone that seemed to vibrate in the bones of everyone present. The tendrils of light pulsed in rhythm with the sound, growing brighter with each beat until they seemed to be made of pure white fire. Ilara's body tensed in agony as she absorbed half of Marcus's mortal wounds, her skin splitting in mirror images of his injuries. Blood flowed from her shoulder, her side, her chest, blood that glowed with the same eerie light as the crystals. As the first light of dawn broke over the fortress, the ritual reached its climax. The crystal light flared one final time, then seemed to sink beneath their skin, disappearing from view but leaving behind a tangible connection that hummed in the air between them. Marcus opened his eyes. They were no longer just gray. They now contained flecks of the same iridescent blue that marked Ilara's irises, glowing with an inner light that was not entirely human. And when Ilara looked at her reflection in the polished surface of her spear, She saw that her eyes, once purely blue, now held storms of gray swirling within their depths. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice stronger than it had any right to be, given his injuries. He reached up, touching her face, seeing the change in her eyes with a mixture of wonder and concern. "I made us one," she replied, her voice holding both strength and infinite sadness. "I gave you part of my life force and took part of yours in return. We are bound now, forever." He tried to sit up, grimacing with the effort, then looked puzzled. "The pain, it's there, but it's distant, like an echo." "Because I carry half of it now," she explained, her hand unconsciously moving to her own chest, where she felt the phantom pain of his wounds. "The ritual doesn't just heal, it distributes the damage between us." Marcus's eyes widened in understanding. "You're in pain, because of me." "Yes. Why would you do that?" She had no simple answer for him. Instead, she said, "Rest. We both need to recover." As the days passed, they discovered what this bond truly meant. They could sense each other's presence, even at a distance. In battle, they moved as if sharing one mind, anticipating each other's actions with uncanny precision. But there was a price. When one was wounded, the other felt the echo of that pain. When one experienced joy, the other felt it resonating within them like the overtones of a struck bell. This bond, this sharing of life and sensation, became the physical manifestation of what had been growing between them since that first moment in the desert. A connection that transcended their differences, that found strength in those very differences. Ilara became the new chieftain of the Blood Spear clan, but she ruled differently. She abolished the cruel rituals. She made peace with the human colony that Corvus had wanted to destroy. She taught her people that true strength lies not in blind adherence to tradition, but in wisdom, compassion, and the ability to change while honoring the core values that gave their traditions meaning. Most importantly, she tracked down the young warriors who had been sent off-world and brought them home, breaking the contracts that had bound them to the corporation, refusing to allow her people to be used as weapons or tools. This earned her enemies among the powerful, but also fierce loyalty from her clan and their families. Marcus, having survived but been forever altered by the life-binding ritual, remained by her side. Not as an outsider, not as her rescued prey, but as her partner, her advisor, her heart. The bond they shared transcended simple attraction or alliance. It was a meeting of souls, of two people who had seen the worst in each other and in themselves, and chose to see the best instead. During a council meeting 6 months after Corvus's death, a delegation from Nexus Extraction Technologies arrived, demanding that the agreements made with the previous chieftain be honored. "The contracts were signed," the lead negotiator insisted, sliding a data tablet across the table. "Your clan is legally obligated to comply." Ilara and Marcus exchanged a glance, their uniquely colored eyes communicating volumes without a word being spoken. Through their bond, she felt his controlled anger, his tactical assessment of the situation. He felt her fierce protectiveness, her unwillingness to yield. "Those contracts," Ilara said slowly, "were signed by a leader who betrayed his people. They have no validity." "I'm afraid galactic commercial law disagrees," the negotiator replied smoothly. "We've invested considerable resources based on these agreements. If you refuse to honor them, we'll be forced to take more direct measures." Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "The last corporation representative who made threats in this hall died where you're standing." The negotiator paled slightly but held his ground. "We're not threatening. We're simply stating facts. Nexus Extraction has planetary development rights across 3 sectors. We have private security forces larger than most planetary armies. And we," Ilara countered, rising to her full height, "have a clan of warriors who will die before allowing our sacred lands to be desecrated. But more importantly," she nodded to Marcus, who activated a data crystal they had prepared. "We have evidence." The holographic display came to life, showing the videos and documents they had recovered from the patrol skiff, the illegal operations, the human experimentation, the slavery program that violated not just clan law, but every interstellar human rights convention. This evidence has been encrypted and distributed to 17 different news outlets, legal authorities, and human rights organizations across the sector, Marcus explained. "If anything happens to us or to this clan, it all goes public immediately." The negotiator's professional demeanor crumbled. "This is blackmail." "No," Ilara said firmly. "This is justice. Now leave our lands, and tell your masters that the Bloodspear clan is no longer for sale." After the delegation departed, Marcus turned to Ilara with a rare smile. "That went well." She nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "They'll be back. With weapons next time, not words." "Then we'll be ready," he assured her, taking her hand. Their shared life force gave them unexpected advantages. In council meetings, they could communicate silently, a slight pressure from one mind to the other, conveying volumes. In negotiations with the human settlements, Marcus could feel when Ilara was nearing her breaking point and take over seamlessly, while she could sense when his patience with his own kind was wearing thin. They moved and fought as one being in two bodies, their reflexes and instincts perfectly synchronized, but the bond had its price. When Marcus was wounded while defending a border settlement, Ilara collapsed in the middle of a clan meeting, feeling his pain as if it were her own. When she suffered from the seasonal fever that afflicted her people, he endured the same burning symptoms. Though no human had ever contracted the disease before, they learned that their lives were truly one now. Neither could suffer or rejoice alone. Together they faced new challenges. The mining corporation did not give up easily on their claim to the sacred lands. Other clans viewed Ilara's rule with suspicion, but they met each challenge together. With a combination of her passion and his pragmatism, her honor and his survival instinct. One evening, as they stood on the highest tower of the fortress, watching the twin suns set over the desert in a blaze of red and gold, Marcus turned to her. "I never asked you," he said quietly, "if you regret it." The ritual. Ilara was silent for a long moment, her eyes blue with swirls of gray fixed on the horizon. "There are moments," she admitted finally, "when the pain is great, or when I feel your sorrow for your lost brother as keenly as if it were my own, that I wonder what it would be like to be separate again." She turned to face him, her hand reaching up to touch his face, tracing the lines that had softened in the months since their bond was forged. "But then I remember what it was like before, to be alone, to be certain of everything and to understand nothing." She smiled, a rare and beautiful sight. "And I would choose this path again, 1,000 times over." Marcus covered her hand with his own, as would I. They became a legend on the planet and beyond, the story of the disgraced huntress and the human outcast, a symbol that even in the most brutal desert, under the light of two merciless suns, something new and beautiful can be born from the harshest conditions. If only one is brave enough to question old hatreds, to reach across boundaries, and to recognize that sometimes the enemy is not who we were taught to fear. In the end, it was not honor or survival that saved them both. It was something much simpler and much more profound. The recognition that in the vast emptiness of the universe, finding someone who will stand beside you, who will shield you with their body and fight for your truth, is the rarest and most precious treasure of all.